Stephanie, good to see you again. Dallas ISD has a deficit going into the next school year later this year. The final budget's going to be presented to the school board on Thursday. You've said there will be some job cuts. What kind of positions are these? How many are we talking about?
Well, and I don't have the number off the top of my head. I do want to remind everybody that most of these cuts are actually a result of the fact that our ESSER dollars, or what sometimes people refer to as the COVID dollars, the federal government assistance during COVID, this is the last year that those dollars funneled through the state to the districts, right? So that's about $263 million over and above our general operating budget that was being infused into our schools for additional tutoring, additional supplemental pay, additional positions to create smaller groups of students for additional assistance. And we also used a lot of that early on, as you may recall, for a lot of the COVID materials, which
Sure.
also included upgrades to HVAC systems and so on and so forth. So the positions that we're going to be cutting are really primarily based on actual loss of student enrollment. So as we've all seen declines in student enrollment, and that's true across pretty much everyone in the state, with the exception of those fast growth school districts. There are a few of those out in the suburbs. I would
Right.
say suburbs of the suburbs, right? And
Farther
so
out, right.
further out, yes, absolutely. And those then generate less revenue. So the losses aren't so much as a result of just that ESSER dollars are going away, although 263 million in Dallas ISD is obviously a lot of
Right.
positions. But what's really happening is, as we decline in enrollment, we decline in revenue because we get paid per student, and therefore we should have less of a need for the same number of positions.
Well, let me ask you about the declining enrollment because Texas is a state that's growing. Where are these students going? And to be fair and to point out, it's not just Dallas ISD that's seeing declining enrollment. I've talked to a lot of large school districts that are also seeing it. I don't know where the students are going though.
Well, two things. One, we don't know where all the students are going, because even our neighboring school districts, and you all cover them well, also, they're having to make some even tougher decisions than Dallas ISD is making, in terms of already looking at consolidating schools and doing things that we would never thought suburban school districts would have to do, right? In addition to that, there has been a decline in birth rates in our county, and that happened a few years ago, and it's actually hitting what would be our kindergarten classes, our first grade classrooms. So the age 4, 5, and 6, there was actually a decline in birth rates. So you're going to see that blip, which is affecting us. Now, the trend has also reversed itself over the last few years. So conversely, we should now eventually see an increase, but it's not there now. And you're right, though, Jason, there's a lot of movement into North Texas, but housing costs are still keeping people from moving into Dallas County, and therefore Dallas ISD. So this is really complex. I think the other thing is, people want a simple solution to a very complex problem.
Do you expect the Dallas ISD is going to have to consolidate any campuses, close any schools anywhere?
Certainly not this year. We were able to make different decisions. This board, I want to actually take a minute, Jason, to say part of the reason we're in the situation that is a serious situation in Dallas ISD, but I wouldn't say we have not yet reached crisis, and I hope to avert crisis, but we're in a serious funding situation. But I have to thank our board of trustees and my predecessor, because this board, unlike other elected officials, I don't know, let's think about Washington, D.C. as an example. They can't come to consensus and therefore end up at near shutdowns of governments. This board has been very conservative financially. We knew ESSER dollars were going to come to an end, and so we prepared for an ESSER slope rather than an ESSER cliff. And so we have dollars set aside for this deficit that will be almost $190 million, but there was a plan for that. But we can only sustain that, Jason, for 2 years, this year and one more. We won't be able to do that if we don't get funding that meets the needs of the 5.5 million students that we're serving here in Texas.
I know you talk to a lot of lawmakers, Stephanie. What are they telling you about school funding? Because you and I have had this conversation. I'm talking to many of your colleagues across the state who say the exact same thing. They want the legislature to provide more cash for students.
Well, the math is what the math is. And I know people like to put up a lot of different numbers, but facts should somehow play into the conversation. There has not been an increase in student funding in Texas since 2019, yet there have been additional underfunded and unfunded mandates. Let's just take safety and security off the top as one of those areas of need. And we're all in support of that. But we didn't get any of the dollars to really meet that expectation. So then you've got to take those dollars from somewhere else. So the math is what the math is. There's been almost a 20% inflation rate, and yet there hasn't been any dollars put in. I think conservatively, depending on what research study you look at, Texas is at the bottom 10th of student funding in public education. Those are not numbers Stephanie Elizalde is making up.
Yeah.
Those are real numbers.
I've seen those similar ones. A couple last questions here. Republican lawmakers tell me that they expect school vouchers to pass in some form or fashion. I know you have a close ear on this and waiting to see what happens. I'm curious, so are you working behind the scenes at all to try to help craft this so it has less of an impact on public ed?
I think not being a politician, but understanding that you'd rather be, in the words of Ann Richards, I'd rather be at the table than on the menu. We have to recognize what we did observe in the primaries, and the likelihood of private school subsidies being able to pass is very, very likely. We need to come to grips with that reality. And I think we can help the process in terms of what are the safeguards that should be in place for our taxpayers to make sure that their public school dollars that are going to private schools are being utilized in an accountable way. So examples, if the STAR test or any state assessment is good enough for an ISD, then I think that the private schools should welcome that same assessment, right? If school districts have to keep kids, barring any mandated expulsions for the full school year, well, then if a private school takes one of our kiddos, they should have to keep them for the full school year as well. Because remember, once those dollars go to that other private school, if the private school lets those students go throughout the school year, where are they going to return to? Well, they're going to probably return to us, but we won't have any of the dollars. So I think we can actually help, because I do think everyone wants to serve our 5.5 million kids properly. And I think everybody, certainly I as a taxpayer myself, want to know where my tax dollars are going and that they're being held accountable.
So you are having some of those conversations, at least on the background?
I think it's a responsibility we have, that otherwise we're just burying our head in the sand. So I will absolutely answer that question directly. It's time for us to start having conversations about being for something, not just against something, so that we can help craft a system that can help our students. Let's stay focused on the students.
Yeah. Finally, I wanted to ask you about, obviously the school year is about to end right now. What are you looking forward to the most or the least about the next school year?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to us building on the amazing work that our campuses, our principals, our teachers, our support staff have done in this uplifting of a comprehensive on grade level curriculum, and the way our teachers have taken to that with their own creativity. And I've seen just wonderful examples of students meeting higher expectations than ever before. So I'm really actually looking forward to some of the assessment data to come in, as I am anticipating our students doing well. And I want to build on that. I don't want to change anything else up on our educators this next year. I want to keep as many things the same as I can. They've been through a lot. And what I'm most concerned about is what I think everyone is. It's got to be school safety, because everything that happens in our communities ultimately is a reflection that ends up in our schools. And I don't think there's a superintendent or frankly an educator in Texas that isn't each and every day really thinking about how do we continue to make sure that what's happening outside of our schools doesn't end up inside of our schools.
Stephanie, it's always good to see you. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Jason.